Let's get it. This is Life's Essential Ingredients with Jeff and a Mike, where we hope to inform, inspire, and transform lives, one essential ingredient at a time. Welcome to the show. Oh yeah, listeners, here we go again. And I just get so hyped up every episode I get to be part of. And it's just because we have incredible guests that are so generous with their time and their expertise. And Dai, our guest today, is no different. And we are season 3, episode 26. And if you're new to this show, thanks for tuning in. And we have listeners in 41 countries, 604 cities. And so thank you so much for being part of that. And Dai is getting me all hyped up today. If you just listen in, we do record this on YouTube as well. But this guy's got great energy. It is going to be a fun episode. But before we get into that, this podcast is part of a nonprofit. The nonprofit is called C4 Leaders. C4 Leaders is the only nonprofit to utilize the pizza making process to create space for our companions to be seen, heard, and loved. We write children's books, obviously host this podcast, and use the most amazing handmade, hand-tossed sourdough pizza to bring out the best in each other. And if you want to learn more about that work, check out pizzadays.org. But let's get into our guest. I have Dai Manuel coming from Vancouver, British Columbia, and where he will for sure inform, inspire, and transform your life. Even with just his smile, he's getting me so hyped up. He is all over the place as far as social media, but I think the best place is just go to his website, and it's DaiManuel.com. So about our guest, Dai, the ultimate super dad, husband extraordinaire, and all around life enthusiast. And I can just feel it just by looking at him right here. Dai's on a mission to inspire and positively impact 1 million role models across the globe, encouraging them to lead a functionally healthy life through education, community, and a whole lot of encouragement. As an award-winning digital thought leader and author, Dai has mastered the art of leading by example, always staying true to his values of fitness, family, faith, finances, and for sure, fun. He knows firsthand how challenging it can be to juggle life's responsibilities while prioritizing health and happiness. But don't let his impressive resume fool you. Dai's infectious personality and contagious enthusiasm truly set him apart. And for sure, I feel that already. He is a sought-after lifestyle mentor, executive performance coach, and keynote speaker who will leave you feeling inspired, motivated, and ready to take on the world. Dai, thanks for sharing your many gifts with the world and for being our guest. Welcome to the show. Let's go, baby. Let's go.
Thank you, Jeff. Oh man, I gotta say, like, even listening to the pre-recorded intro that you have, I was like, I would totally dig it if you just would narrate some meditations. I would love to listen to your voice and just be like, oh man, I am total Zen. You got the voice, my man. I love it. I love it. And thanks for the kind introduction. That was too kind. Too kind.
Well, yeah, thank you for your work. And it's one of the highlights of the show for me, because I think we get wrapped up, we get busy living and doing our things. And I don't know if we take the time to really sit back and not to be arrogant about it, but to realize that we are doing some things to make a difference in the world. And I think in order to give us the energy to keep doing that, not that it needs to come from an outside source. I think we have what we need within, but it's nice to just kind of get that validation every now and then. And so, yeah, I hope we did that for you. But Dad, we always start out every episode with a thought of the day. We're season 3, episode 26. We're over 120 or so episodes. And we're 100% on these thoughts, like resonating with our guest. And this one is from Brene Brown. Here it goes. Only when we are brave enough to explore the darkness will we discover the infinite power of our light. Why would I pick that for you?
Oh, well, listen, I know the dark. I know it well. But I also know that I'm only here today because I was diligent enough and I had the support, but I also was willing to support myself to work through it, rather than run away from it. And yeah, I can honestly say that light is on the other side. It really is. And you can't. I mean, let's be honest. I know it's almost cliche, but you can't appreciate one without the other, right? Like. I mean, it's really easy to normalize the darkness. And I think society, especially media, does a really good job of that. And that's why I'm excited to be here with you connecting on your platform, which is, man, you talk about a beacon. It's like a beacon of light. And I think we need more people out there doing that to offset all the darkness and to show people other ways through it, right? So I love that. Brene Brown, man, she's fantastic. Absolutely fantastic. Yeah.
She's amazing. And yeah, glad that hit home. And yeah, I do, I've been involved with my second nonprofit, and I was a nurse is what I did as a profession for 29 years. Wow, I've seen a lot of darkness in that. Half my career was in a level 1 trauma center in the trauma ICU, taking care of people shot, stabbed, really bad car accidents, and seen a lot of crazy things. But I do, like you, and the intent of this show is to focus on the light. Because there's so much darkness that is out there. And if we don't take action towards sharing all the incredible things that are out there and to choose to look for sources of light on the day to give us the nourishment that we need, then life just becomes too difficult without that. And that's why I don't even really mess around with the news or a whole bunch with social media, because it's just, I don't want to take my energy into something that's not going to allow me to just shine bright.
Jeff, I can relate to that so well. It was many, many years ago, I realized that social media was starting to have a real negative impact on my life. And so I made a real bold move, and at least I thought it was bold compared to what I was doing up to that point. Because I decided, you know what, I'm going to spend my time on social just creating content and then engaging with those that engage with my content. And that's it. So when it comes to consuming social media, feeding that algorithm, right? I was like, I can't play that game anymore. I just can't. It was really affecting me negatively. And I saw it also how it was starting to impact some of my closest relationships, but more importantly, my mental health. That comparatitis, right? That whoa, look at them, why not me? Like it was incredible, right? And then also just seeing a lot of stuff that really brought no value to my life. But it's hard, right? Like, I mean, come on, let's talk about the dopamine effect, right? Like we get that instant gratification, that scroll, it's easy, we can do it anytime, anywhere, especially if we're on the toilet, like it's simple. It's simple. It's almost too accessible. And I know, I'll tell you right now, going off and doing that detox and getting off social for a period of time to really make that work for me, it was challenging at the beginning. It really was. So yeah, I can really relate to what you shared there. Thank you.
Yeah, when I love quotes, and my last job before I went into early retirement, I was a nursing professor. One of my students, they knew I liked quotes, and she gave me this card and it said, if it costs you peace, it's too expensive. And there's almost not a day that goes by that doesn't just sit with me, and what am I putting my energy to, and what is the expense of that? And so, yeah, but let's get into you, man. I'm so hyped up. We always talk about every episode because I just want the listeners to kind of get to know you. And so you can go anywhere you want with the question, but what was life like growing up?
Well, like anybody, I like to believe that there's always those great moments of childhood that we look back on, not only with nostalgia, but with fondness, because it's those early lessons that really got us started on our path to becoming who we either envisioned ourselves becoming, or more importantly, they planted the seeds of which we could become. And, my parents were great role models in a lot of ways, but they also had their challenges, like all of us, right? We all got our heads and tails, so to speak, the two sides of the coin. And, my parents, my mom, gosh, like, she always had a side hustle going. Okay, she did. She worked as an RN, went back to school when my brother and I were both, under the age of 10. She wanted to level up her education, got her master's, moved into more of a supervisory overseeing role for an entire region of Ontario. And she worked in the public health, but also in the sex education side of things. And so that also created some interesting conversations around our house because my mom believed any question my boys asked me, I will just give them the straight goods. So when my friends found out about that, they would often come to our house. They would also come to get condoms. So it was pretty funny. But and I'm an 80s kid too, right? And so back in the 80s, this was just it was fun, but it was also like, whoa, what's going on here? And it was just my mom, but even though she had this career path, she always had sort of this entrepreneurial spirit and this joie de vivre where she just wanted to do things that she always wanted to do when she was younger, but maybe was now starting to see herself age and was like recognizing that window of time slowly starts to close. The energy goes along with it, right? And so she got into acting, working in public theater. She started directing plays. It was just awesome. And even now, as she approaches 80, she's still active like crazy and doing all sorts of stuff. I'm like, I can't keep up with my mom, And then on the flip side, I had my dad, which was extremely introverted, but went to school for veterinary medicine, had a successful practice, but he was a workaholic. When we talk about that struggle of the juggle of life, well, he really had one ball that he was juggling, and that was his business, his practice, and he loved his practice. And at times, I sometimes felt like I was, the second fiddle to that, and that raised some challenges, because my father and I, we had some problems communicating, connecting, and I like to think that we reconciled, and we got to a certain place where we loved each other, but we may not have expressed that. And that's a whole nother conversation because he passed 5 years ago from pancreatic cancer. And there's a lot of things that were left unsaid, but we were both at peace with that, and we were okay with that. But that's another story. And so these are my two major inputs into my life as a child, right? And then my parents separated and divorced when I was 9, put me in a bit of a funk. And that's probably being really light about it. I became very introverted. I became very withdrawn. And again, this is like 1985, 86. So you can imagine we didn't have the internet like we do today. There wasn't a lot of resources. And in fact, there was a lot of negative stigma around divorce. It's not like today. And I mean, today there's a reverse stigma. It's like, well, you're still married. Wow. It's like, celebrate it, right? And so there wasn't a lot of resources and there was a lot of stigmatization. And so that also forced me to go more inward. And I learned to console myself with food. And it wasn't like I was sitting around going, hey, Jeff, pass me some more salad, please. I was going for the instant gratification, instant mood enhancement. So it was a lot of very unhealthy, nutritious, poor foods. But it gave me that instant emotional response that I was looking for, that little bit of a high. And then I'd watch movies, I'd play video games, and that was my lifestyle. After 5 years, I got to a place, by 15, I was morbidly obese. And man, it was tough. It was tough. Like, there's nothing easy about it. Anybody that's been in that state of unhealth, I mean, there's nothing normal about it, even though it felt like that was my normal place. And it was like, I'm stuck here and I'm never going to get out of it. Fortunately, I made a change. I got to a place where I wanted to prioritize my health, and I didn't know how to do it, but I knew I could learn. I knew I could figure it out. And to be honest with you, and I think a lot of people relate to this, and then I'll sort of leave it at that and we can continue to chat. And I'd like to hear your thoughts on this, especially. But I think there's probably a lot of people that are listening and watching this right now that can think about those traumatic moments in your life where you made a big, big decision and you had a huge pivot. And if you think about what the motivation was to make the pivot, mine was completely fear-based. And in fact, I was more afraid of, by the age of 20, here I was 15. I was like, my gosh, it's taken me 5 years to get to this place where my BMI is well in its 40s. I've got early onset asthma. My joints are like inflamed and sore. I get out of breath going up a flight of stairs. I can barely tie my own shoes. So I go for the Velcro shoes, right? And so, all these things I'm chuckling about now, and I'm not trying to make light of it, but that's just my situation that I was in. And I got really real where all of a sudden I started thinking, okay, by 20, if I haven't done anything different than I've been doing it for the last 5 years, it's not going to be as good as it is right now. And right now it sucks, So I was actually more afraid of not changing than the idea of trying to figure out how to change. And that was that moment. It was like up here in Canada, we got the sports network, TSN. I know you have ESPN down south, but there's that moment where the underdog, it's all of a sudden the entire game changes, right? It's like that one key play. And all of a sudden it's like, whoa, the underdogs are now going to be the winners, or the victors, or they're just going to turn the situation around. And that was sort of my TSN turning point, was that initial moment. And I made a commitment never to go back. It took me 5 years to put the weight on. It took me about 20 months to take it off. So, and ever since then, I mean, everything changed, right? And it sort of set me on this trajectory of prioritizing my health as one of my core values. And I also love to help people with that same challenge, is reclaiming that health that they are born into, deserving. And honestly, we all deserve to be able to thrive. And it's in our DNA, resiliency. Look at the human species. My climate change friends are like, yeah, we're too damn resilient. Look at what we're doing. We're over consuming, overpopulating. I'm like, well, but it's in our DNA. At least we are resilient and we can overcome hard stuff. And so that was my childhood, man. I mean, obviously I've skipped over a bunch, but those are some of the most formative things that occurred to me during that period of time. And some of it, I carried some baggage with me, full disclosure, Jeff, which I'm sure we'll get into a little bit later as we're talking about the dark places. But, that was my first time overcoming something very dark in my life, very hard, very, very intimidating. And it taught me a valuable lesson. It taught me that I could overcome, I could change, and it happens when I decide to make it happen. And that's really what I took out of that,
Yeah. Well, thanks for sharing what you shared. And it does make so much sense in researching you and who you are now and the values that you have that are, I would say, your life's essential ingredients. I don't want to put words in your mouth, but your health, obviously, your fitness, your family, your faith, and then how people kind of overcome and find that deep meaning to create change in their life. And I know I'm just getting to see you live, but in reading about you and looking at some of your posts and reading through some of your blogs, and I was wondering, you have a lot on your blogs, and I like your website about, the medical profession and nursing. And now it makes sense. I didn't know where that was coming from. I didn't know that your mom was a nurse, and but just incredible, everything that you're doing. And I'm sure that the darkness that you feel from part of your childhood is what also inspires you to reach out and be that beacon of light for yourself, for your family, and for the people that you serve. And so it's probably, this might come out wrong and probably not the right words to use, but a blessing to have lived in that space and to have that taste in your mouth still, to understand, what, I don't like the taste of that. Those aren't ingredients that I want to have on my life recipe moving forward. But you've had that taste, and that, no, I'm going to make a different choice. And then I'm going to inspire a million other people and be a role model for them. And I love how you put that big goal, impact 1 million role models across the globe, encouraging them to lead a functionally healthy life through education, community, and a whole lot of encouragement. It just makes so much sense now after what you just shared. And so, yeah, hyped about it. But let's get into a little bit. I got no idea if this is funny or not, but researching you, the moose is loose.
Oh, yeah.
What's up with that?
Well, for one thing, I mean, when people think moose, they think Canada. Like, let's be real here, or I guess Alaska too. But hey, Canadians own the moose. All right, it's like it's on our quarters, for Pete's sake. Like it's like a national animal for us. And the moose is such a big, and I don't know if you've ever seen one in person, but if you look them up online, I mean, they can grow to be absolutely massive. Like their hind legs stand about 10 feet tall when they're fully grown, and those friggin' antlers are massive. But here's the thing. Moose aren't the most graceful of animals, okay? They're not like gazelles, right? They sort of prance around and move around and jump. Moose are pretty cumbersome. I mean, you hear them coming in the woods. You can't help it because those freaking antlers are getting caught up on stuff all the time. The ongoing joke, especially when I started into something called CrossFit, and this is going back to like 2008, I was always a gym guy. I was active, but I was thinking I was fit. And then I sold equipment to this guy that opened the first CrossFit gym in Canada, which it was actually right here in Vancouver. This is before CrossFit was really a thing. And I sold him the gear in like 2007, and I was humming about going in. He kept inviting me, hey, come try a class, come try a class. Eventually I said, okay, I'm gonna go try this class because I saw the movie 300. I don't know if you've seen that movie 300,
I know
Frank
what you're
Miller.
talking about, but yeah, I did.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, Gerard Butler and all those guys, and they're totally jacked, right? All these guys in the Spartan army, right? And I was like, holy smokes. And when I looked into what their training protocols were for them to get ready for the movie, it was all CrossFit principles. I was like, okay, there's obviously something to that, because I was like looking at those dudes and I'm like, oh, I want to look like that. That'd be pretty cool. And so I went down and I did my intro class, and I got totally spanked, like to the point that my buddy Patty, he took a photo of me at the end of it. And, I'm not overly fit, but I was a strong guy. I was fit enough. I was a gym guy, right? So anyways, I'm up against a chain link fence and I'm like dry heaving. And it's like so funny because here I am, this guy that's a partner in this very large fitness company selling equipment to all the gyms and people's homes, known sort of as a fitness guy. And I just got spanked. I got my butt handed to me. And it was both humbling, but also exciting, because I was like, what the hell just happened, right?
Yeah.
And during that first session, there's a test that they do where they give you a 20-pound medicine ball. They're these big round balls, right? And you basically got to hug it, hold it, put it on your shoulder, whatever you got to do, and then you got to run a mile. And he's like, running as fast as you can. This is just a baseline. We just want to get your baseline. And so I'm out there going, I come back, he's like, hey, Moose. Because I run like a moose, okay? Like there's nothing graceful about this guy, okay? I'm like 215, 6'1". I'm big, I'm oafy. I mean, I am what I am, And so ever since then, but it's also, there's sort of the Jughead Archie comics play, Moose and that with the big jawline. So there's sort of that double play. And you know what? The moniker stuck. People started calling me Coach Moose. And that's when I launched my first blog, which was just me diarizing publicly my journey into this new sport called CrossFit, sharing my experiences, sharing the workouts, being very honest and humble, and being like, wow, this is tough, but man, is it fun. And yeah, that's where the name came from. And it's just really stuck ever since.
I love it. I've never seen a moose live, but I coached high school basketball, and one of my players, two of them actually were playing on the team. Chico State was playing at Alaska Fairbanks, and I actually like edited the picture, but the moose was going right through the town, and it was next to like a Honda like minivan, and it was bigger, way bigger than that. And I was like, there's no way. And so that's the only moose that I've seen in a picture like that. But yeah, crazy. Well, what a cool story. One of the things that I wanted to ask you, because I know fitness and coaching and building people up and encouraging them, but so pushing your body both mentally and physically beyond what you think is possible. How obviously you went through that with the story that you shared, and it's been a big part of what you do. But how do you help your clients, not listen to that voice in their head that's telling them they can't do that or they don't want to experience the pain? How do you help people get started with that?
That's a great question. And there's a multitude of answers I could give, but I think the simplest approach, or Occam's razor, right? The simplest of answers is usually the best answer. For me, it's just getting people to a place where they start to feel better every morning when they wake up. Because it's amazing how impactful to our mental health is that very first few minutes that we wake up in the morning. It really sets the tone for the whole day. I often invite my clients. I'm like, I don't care. You're going to fake it till you make it. Okay. When you wake up in the morning, you hear that alarm go, you're not hitting snooze. You're going to pretend the IOC, the International Olympic Committee, is in your bedroom, and they are going to rate how you get out of bed and start your day. And I want you to go for gold. Okay. So it's getting up with gusto and just committing to have a great day right then and there. Now that's more on the mental health side. Now, when it comes to the physical piece, so now you're up, you're moving. Before you go to search your phone, scroll the social, watch the news, you're going to do something for you, especially your health. And so I often invite people, have a couple glasses of water, 2 glasses of water, just get yourself hydrated, because, hydration is so important for the effectiveness of our metabolism, also how our lymph nodes and drains a lot of the ugly stuff that's in our bodies. And I know you know all this stuff. You could give a much better explanation, Jeff, with your medical background, but I'll give the simple version, okay, the layman definition. but water is so critical, and so get yourself feeling good, get yourself hydrated, gets the joints also a little bit of lubrication. And then all I ask people to do, get outside and go for a half an hour walk. And I often ask them to cascade something. And what I mean by cascade these minor or little commitments into one. So I'll invite them. It's like you put on your AirPods or whatever, your headset, your Beats, whatever you got to listen to, and listen to something inspiring while you're doing that 30-minute walk. I know music gets us grooving, and that's great. I have no problem people listening to music, but that first 30 minutes, when you're out there walking, you're enjoying the outdoors, you're getting that fresh air, you just start to feel energized. But now your brain's ready to receive some powerful, inspiring, and motivating messages. So why not listen to a podcast like yours, Jeff, right? Or listen to a TED Talk, listen to an Audible book. Like, there's so much access to inspiring information online. There's no excuse. And so that's how I invite people to start their day. And when they come back from the walk, green smoothie. And that's it. You start your day like that and you commit to doing that for 1 week, watch out. I've never had anybody come back and go, Dai, you know what, I did that and it didn't work. I'm like, whatever. Like, I've never had anybody say that, because if you truly did it for 7 days in a row, you'll realize how simple, I'm not saying easy, but how simple the process can be to start seeing positive change in your life. And it's so minor. Like, it's literally from the time you get up to the time you get back and have that smoothie, it's all going to be under 40 minutes. It's so quick. And people tell me, I don't have time in the morning. I'm like, well, you're going to get up a little bit earlier. And you know what? And they're like, well, I go to bed at this time. I'm like, I don't care. You can keep going to bed as late as you want, but you're going to make a commitment to get up early. And trust me, after a week, you're going to want to go to bed earlier, because you're not going to want to wake up feeling groggy, but it doesn't matter. You're going to commit to you, because you're the only one that can do this for yourself. And if you were to talk to any one of your family members and say, hey, do you think I'm worth making these changes? What do you think your kids are going to say? What do you think your friends are going to say? What do you think your coworkers? They're all going to say, yeah, you're worth it. How can we help you? That takes a little bit of vulnerability. We have to ask. We have to put ourselves out there. But I'll tell you, there's people around us just waiting for us to ask for help. And it only took me about 33 years to figure that one out. But once I figured it out, everything changed.
I love it. And I'm not even gonna share, because I basically start my day the way that you just described a very version of that. But I want to get into your expertise, because you said simple, not easy. But I think I'd be missing having your expertise on the show and not ask you, because you've been doing this for a long time.
Yeah.
How do you keep things simple? So I'm trying to say, because we have so many pulls at our energy,
right.
And it can be difficult to then have the energy to put into getting up, having a couple of glasses of water, going out on the walk. So what tips do you have for, and this might be a very difficult and long-winded, answer, but what tips do you have for people to simplify life so they can focus on doing what you just suggested, which is amazing?
Well, thanks. I try to keep the process simple, at least just to get started, right? And because I find that getting started is hard enough for a lot of people, because the issue today, and we see this a lot, and with your medical background, I'm sure you're very, very aware of this, but we've normalized sickness. We've normalized being unhealthy. We've normalized, oh man, I don't have any energy, so I'm going to go buy some. That's normal. I mean, look at the ads, right, that are on TV and in the magazines and online. Like, buy this energy drink, right? Buy this coffee, have this sugary beverage or sugary food. We're bombarded with this, but we're told, hey, you get energy from this. And hey, listen, I'm a coffee drinker too. Like, I'm not putting coffee down, but I'm saying, if that is your instant go-to to create energy for yourself, you're always going to be chasing that. But our bodies have the potential to make its own energy, and it does it very well if we can help it along with some simple habits. But habits, ultimately make who we are. Whatever inputs we put in will impact the outputs. And so if we're getting certain outputs in our life that we do not like, we do not enjoy, or making us feel negative, not only about ourselves, about our situation, about our perspective on the world, we have to start saying, well, maybe the things I'm putting into me the thoughts I'm feeding my mind with, the media I'm taking in, the people I'm hanging around, the place that I'm working. Like, start looking at even the foods or the activities that we do. But all these inputs are affecting and creating the output. It's creating the world that we then have to figure out our own way in. And so my invitation to people is just start to be aware of what you're allowing in, because you do allow it in. All right. And a lot of us do it freely. I've been there. I've done that. And I continue to do it. And I catch myself doing it. Okay. I'm not saying this is a perfect system. It's far from it, but it's a system and it's a process that can be adhered to. But don't get lost in the minutia, because I think this is what you were also alluding to earlier, Jeff, because there's a lot of content out there, especially in the last 10 years, and I think it sort of started with James Clear, and James Clear's got a great book, Atomic Habits. Amazing. Awesome. And it's really one of the first real books that came out that talked about this idea of creating daily rituals and small little habits and how to create big change. And then we've seen a lot of spin-offs from that of people talking about morning routines and morning rituals, right? But they have these long lists, and I'll use some of your language, of ingredients to make this recipe. And I mean, the more ingredients there are, the more preparation, the more complexity, just more, right, to keep track of. And if you're just getting started, right, if you're making a pizza for the first time and you're like, my gosh, I got to go buy 20 ingredients, it's like, oh, this seems like a lot more work than I was ready to sign up for. Show somebody how to make a 6-ingredient pizza, though. I mean, my kids, I remember when they were younger, like, it was like cheese and pepperoni. That was it. They loved it. It was simple, right? It was like 3 ingredients, a nice pizza shell, cheese, pepperoni, happy kids, right? And happy kids, happy life, I'll tell you. And, but it's figuring out, what do you need? So as much as we have these long laundry lists of things that we can possibly do every day, figure out 1, 2, maybe at most 3 things that you can start to do regularly. Don't worry about taking it as a prescription that if I'm not doing all these things, I fail. Because I'll tell you right now, you'll set yourself up for failure, because inevitably you'll have days where it's like, man, those 10 things I committed to doing every single morning, I can't do one today. Tomorrow, oh, I missed 2 tomorrow, or I wake up tomorrow and I missed 2 today. This has a real negative impact on us. It affects our mental health. It affects our commitment, because we tell ourselves, no, if I didn't do it exactly as it was, why bother? We see people with the gym, right? If I can't work out 5 days a week, why bother? I used to invite people to come to CrossFit. I shared the story, man, I got spanked. Listen, it took me a while to get into it, to get to a certain level where it became fun, right? And I just wanted to push myself, because I was like, no, I'm not going to get spanked. This is not going to be my one and only workout and experience with CrossFit. I'm going to come back because I'm going to show them I can do this, because that was just who I was. But any of us and all of us, I think, have that in us, that ability to want to overcome, to thrive, to do things that we know aren't necessarily easy, but they're worth it once we get to the other side. So figure out what are those 2 or 3 things and just do those consistently. Commit to a week, 2 weeks. I usually invite people 28 days. I find 28 days is a good number. It's 4 weeks. It's not even a full month. It's 4 weeks, I guess, unless it's a leap year. But regardless, that 28 days is enough to really test the waters and figure out what makes sense for me. So when I wake up in the morning, I ask myself, what do I feel like doing today? I do feel like going for a bike ride this morning instead of going to the gym. Great. I'm going to do that instead. Go for a 30-minute bike. What do I feel like listening to? I don't feel like listening to an audible book. I'm going to listen to some tunes today. That's okay. I'm going to do that. I'll listen to my audiobook later. It's okay. You can be flexible. But just be consistent with those 2 or 3 things for the first 4 weeks, and then adapt and adjust as you're evolving. Because I'll tell you, as soon as you start seeing the results come in and you start looking at things differently, you start to experience things differently, people will recognize that in you. They will. They'll acknowledge it. They'll be like, hey, what's going on with you? See you around the water cooler at work. It's like, geez, you're looking good. What's going on? You're kind of like, you seem just so positive. What's happening? And it's contagious, that's what impacts other people around us. You can't help it. And so these are just the simple little things that I invite people to do, but don't overcomplicate is what I'm trying to elaborate on here, because I think it's really easy to overcomplicate things. The more complicated it is, the more likely we're going to set ourselves up to fail. So keep it simple,
Mm.
That is hard enough, as the cliche goes. So yeah, that's sort of my answer. And yes, long-winded.
Oh, it was great. Some really helpful tips, and I want to change it up a little bit because first I just want to honor you doing your TEDx talk. I
Oh, thank
listened to
you.
that, and yeah, it's another thing that I think a lot of people would like to do, but for one reason or another, don't take the time, don't have the courage, aren't vulnerable enough to put themselves out there. And so, yeah, I just want to tell you congrats first of
Thank
all
you.
on
Thank
that.
you.
It's just someone who wants to do that who has not so far. So yeah, that got me hyped up and yeah, listeners definitely check it out. TEDx, and it was why vulnerability is a human thing. And so, yeah, I would love to just, before you even get into that talk, maybe there's a listener out there that wants to be a TEDx speaker and get us hyped up about kind of how good it felt to when you're walking off the stage, because I know it took lots of preparation, all the other stuff
Oh yeah.
but let's just jump to the end. And I'm getting goosebumps. How good did it feel after you dropped the mic on them, just walked off, and like, yes, I did that.
It was incredibly fulfilling. And also for two reasons. One, it was a story that forever changed my life. It was a moment in my life that just like I talked about the 180 moments that we sometimes experience in our lives, and it was a 180 moment. My life could have gone somewhere completely different, and I would not be where I am today. I would not be talking to you. I would not have experienced what I've experienced the last 15 years had I not made that decision, almost 15 years ago. Second to that, telling that story, that moment and sharing that with an audience. It was, some people were aware of it. I had shared a little bit of it on my blog, but I'd never really been vocal about it. And I think a lot of us harbor certain things about ourselves, about our stories, about our narratives, our histories, that we do hold a lot of shame and guilt around. And I'll tell you, I did. I held a lot of that in. And it took me some time to work through that. But I had to remind myself, I'm not that person anymore. I'm not. I'm very different than the person that I was before that date and I made that decision. Just like I'm not that morbidly obese teenager anymore. Even though at times, and I remember, my late teens, even into my 20s, I would very often think of myself in that way, even though that's not who I was anymore. So we harbor these ideas. So going off that stage was one, it was like, wow, I did it. I was able to share that story. And secondly, was that thing that had been on my vision board for 8 years, I could finally say, gosh, I did it. Check. And because it was on my vision board for 8 years, and it was my screensaver on my computer. It was one of the tiles on my screensaver. And so there was that great sense of fulfillment and satisfaction in knowing that I did that. But more importantly, knowing that if even just one person was positively shifted from what I shared, it made it all worthwhile, And to be fair, I remember my daughters, the first time I did it for them when I was practicing, still getting ready, and I was really sheepish even because they didn't really know that story. They were both under the age of 6 at the time when that all transpired, and we never really talked about it. Just it wasn't relevant to talk about at that time, or as they were growing up. And so for them, some of that story was the first time they'd ever heard it, and they came up to me, tears in their eyes, and said how proud they were of me. Like that moment, man, that was even more impactful than what I got from the stage. I could have stopped right then and there just after I shared it with them. And that, I shared it with them like 3 days before I took the stage. I gave them the early preview as a dry run for my wife and my 2 daughters, which are a big part of that moment, of when it happened 15 years ago. So yeah, thanks for asking, man. It's like, I am feeling a bit goosebumpy and shivery right now. It's like, it was a big milestone moment for me, for sure.
Yeah, just so happy for you. And I got goosebumps 3 or 4 times just in listening. So, and you were asking, hey, as long as you helped at least one person, you helped me. And And so cool. And we won't get into the whole talk, but I know you were talking about your mentorship Mondays, and
Yeah.
maybe to inspire somebody else who's listening to be like, hey, man, I can start something, whether I call it whatever. But yeah, talk, just finish this little thought on that, and then we'll move on a different
Yeah.
direction. But, about what mentorship means to you.
Mm. Well, when we think about how we all learn, like how do we learn? How do we grow? How do we become who we are? There's two really big principles at work. One of which is modeling, second of which is mentoring. So, and I would say, like when you were going through your schooling to become an RN, right? To become a nurse, like think about how much modeling is done in that. Now, like doctors, I mean, they spend a long time working in the hospitals to get their doctorate, right? Like they're in their 80, 90, 100-hour weeks, right? Like they're working with patients, they're shadowing other doctors because they're modeling a lot of what they're seeing. We can also refer to this as role modeling, But the mentorship piece is really powerful because it's often where we get the feedback that we're looking for. It's often people that might be a step or two ahead on the same journey that we ourselves are finding ourselves walking. And they have the ability to turn around, look us in the eye and say, hey, you know what? I just tripped over that last week. Watch your step, or, hey, I had this idea once. I did try doing what you just suggested. This is what happened. So maybe if you're going to do it, don't do it this way. Like their mentorship is so powerful because it brings us together. It helps us empathize with one another, connect deeply with each other. But more importantly, it reminds us that we are not alone on these journeys called life. Because a lot of time we think we are. We think no one gets us. No one will understand the problems I'm dealing with or the challenges I'm working through right now. But unless we open up and we share about that, we don't give people the opportunity to say, hey, yo, me too, And I'm speaking a lot to men right now. Okay, so any guys that are listening to this, like, women seem to have this figured out. Okay, they got it figured out. My wife's always had it figured out. She's always had these close group of friends, and they talk about anything and everything. As a man who identifies as a man, I'll tell you, like when I look at some of the mentorship and modeling I got in my 20s, it was a lot of bravado, a lot of very be strong, don't cry. The only emotion that you're okay to show is being stoic or angry. It was like that was what was being modeled. That was the communities I was connecting with, I was hanging out with. And so, when all of a sudden I wake up to this situation where I want to make some changes, I have to start to look at those inputs again, that I referred to earlier. And that's really powerful, right? Mentors have this ability to shape, mold, and literally support people to evolve into the person or the vision that they've had or not, right? Mentorship can go both directions, right? So, I mean, we look at crime syndicates. Well, there's some pretty good mentorship and modeling in that too, but, it might not align with our values. So it's important to take note of all those things because all those things are things that we share. We do share on different levels. But vulnerability is what allows us that opportunity to connect on it, relate on it, and to also support each other better. But I'll take a page out of Brene Brown's book, and keep in mind that not everybody deserves our vulnerability. It is a huge act of trust, and it needs to be earned. And I love that she always states that, especially when she's talking about that in the professional realm, right, in the business realm, because vulnerability does have a place in the boardroom. However, if you're being vulnerable just for the sake of vulnerability or to say, hey, look at me, maybe not the best of intentions, not what you want to model being vulnerable in a strong, confident way, in a way that relates and supports others. So just keep in mind that, like, I don't want to dismiss that or downplay it because it's a big deal. Right. And in case there's anybody listening to this and they're like, oh, I can't be vulnerable. I'm like, listen, have you ever been on a date? Did you get a second date? Did it go somewhere beyond that? Did you end up kissing that significant other? Did you marry? Well, all that's an act of vulnerability. All right. Like it is vulnerability through and through. Did you go in for a job interview? Did you have to share or tell some stories or connect with somebody? Like there's acts of vulnerability happening all the time around us. And I think it's just becoming aware that, it's how we build trust and connection and understanding. And it actually brings us closer. Doesn't propel us apart. So those are some of the things that I really took away from that. And I wish I came to that sooner, to be honest with you, but it came when it came.
Exactly. I love that. And yeah, so much of what you shared. I want to get long winded on my end, but I love how you just said it came when it came. And yeah, I think when we can try and step back and be self aware, and we'll hear what we need to hear when we hear it, and it's just about
Yeah.
to catch ourselves, in that space, and then to try and take action, when we hear it. All right, boom, now I hear it. Now let me go. And uh, I'll just share one little thing about our nonprofit. It's this direction that we're going right now. We're starting these pizza with purpose, and I'll try and get to as many states as I can. And we did our California one last month. And basically, we have an honoree that's selected, and that's going to be an interesting process in itself. And we basically just love on that person for 4 or 5 hours. And we do some activities that bring people together. And I'll use the word vulnerable, but it's really, we just have conversations, guided conversations that allow us to talk about the stuff that's worth talking about, and it's fun. It's emotional. You're up and moving. And then at the end, we come to the table and we break bread together and we make pizza and we sing and just laugh and have a good time. And so C4 leaders, that's what we're putting our energy into. And we have our Oregon and Washington people selected, and so we're just hyped to get across our country, and to do some things to try and make a difference, to allowing us to get into that space, because it is, and I totally agree, you have to make sure that it's the right environment, and sharing of yourself with the people that are worthy to be able to receive that. But I do think that is one thing that can bring us all closer together, because we all have challenges, we all have issues, and or we can put those out and gain strength from each other. Oh yeah, I'm going through that same thing, Dai, and here's what I learned, and let me help you. It leads into the mentorship stuff that you're talking about, and then we can just realize, hey, yeah, let's figure this thing out together. And that's why the first book that I wrote, the children's book, is called We Rise Together.
I love it.
So, but speaking of books, I want to move on from what we're doing. And again, I know it was on your vision board after you just shared it, but congrats on your book, man.
Thank you. Thank you.
So his book, listeners, make sure you check it out. Dai Manuel's Whole Life Fitness Manifesto. So give us a little bit about that.
I'll keep it short on this one. It's really simple. After years and years of supporting people with change, especially, it usually starts with health changes, and then it moves beyond that to the other areas of our lives that we also want to see improvements. And I've heard all the objections, right? All the excuses. I mean, that's just part of being in that industry for so long. And so I started with my wife. Together, we started running a Sunday Fun Day community. And it was Sunday Fun Days, not like maybe my Australian friends might refer to, like they're beer-filled barbecue Sundays. These are healthy Sunday Fun Days, where Sunday mornings people would come together and we do functional fitness and run these classes. And at its peak, when we were fully into it, we were getting 100 plus people showing up on Sunday mornings to work out together. There was no cost. There was no hidden agenda. It was simply, come on down. You're intimidated about fitness. We're going to make it unintimidating. Plus, you're going to be around a whole community of other people that are just like you. And it was awesome. It just caught on and people kept coming. And it was my opportunity to test a bunch of stuff without them knowing about it, right? And it ultimately, after a number of years, we ran that community for about 5 years before we went traveling. And it became a lot of the seeds that grew into my book. And so the book itself is a 28-day program. That's at the core. And it's all functional movements, along with mindful meditation prompts and some personal development prompts. And obviously a lot of other information there, really just to help educate people, so they are not only feeling more inspired and motivated, but more confident and clear on how they too can unlock that level of health and well-being, joy, fulfillment, and happiness in themselves. But it's a 28-day process, and you have to commit 2% of every 24 hours. 2%. And I know there's people that are doing the math right now. What's 2% of 24 hours? It's 30 minutes a day. That's it. Okay. 30 minutes. That's all I'm asking people for. And I'd often have people say, oh, I don't have 30 minutes a day. I'm like, yes, you do. Show me your phone. If you go into these smartphones nowadays, you go to the settings section, there's something called screen time. Look at it. Show me it. Just take a screen, grab it. And I know people are always embarrassed when they do that because they're like, oh my goodness, I had no idea. And that's just our mobile screen.
Yeah.
We're not talking about the TVs and the monitors and et cetera, et cetera. Anyways, long and short, it's 15 minutes of movement with purpose, 5 minutes of mindful meditation, followed by 10 minutes of personal development. You commit to that for 28 days straight and watch out because everything will change. Everything will. I often get messages from people. It's like, oh man, I need a new wardrobe too. You didn't say anything about that in the book. But I'm like, oh, well, but are you okay with that? It's like, yeah, it was worth it. So anyways, it's all good, but it's a great way to get started with change and to develop that clarity and confidence that we need to take decisive action and procrastinate less. And that's what the Whole Life Fitness Manifesto is all about.
It's great. Again, listeners, Dai Manuel's Whole Life Fitness Manifesto. We're season 3, episode 26. Get on with Dai. Check out his website, DaiManuel.com. We got a few more things I want you to briefly, I want to be respectful of your time. Obviously, you're focused on health and development and all that comes with that. I think we'd be doing the listeners a disservice if we didn't go on the flip side of that and root cause of things that affect our health, which is stress. Stress, they say is, there's numbers are all over the place, but anywhere from 80 to 90% is the root cause of all disease process changes that go on within the body. What one or two or whatever tips would you like to share with the listeners if someone is listening, they're like, oh man, I'm just so stressed and I don't know how to stop? What advice would you give them?
I think you almost answered the question with the question. And what I mean by that is this idea of stopping, I know isn't realistic, but the idea of pausing is. Pausing is very powerful. Taking a moment to take a breath, to slow things down so we can really see things more clearly and see things as they truly are. Because we have an amazing way of bouncing between sort of a depressive state as well as an anxious state. And this bouncing or this, we'll use a pickleball because it's so popular now, but this sort of pickleball play back and forth, right? It's like, I'm feeling depressed today. Oh, now I'm feeling really anxious. Oh, I'm feeling, and it creates, again, additional mental health stress, physical stress, emotional stress, relationship stress. But stress isn't always a bad thing. We're only where we are today in our lives as a species because of stress. There's good stress and then there's not so good stress. The World Health Organization has said that, chronic stress is the leading cause. And it's literally an epidemic that we have right now of the 21st century, and I'd say they're pretty accurate on that, based on some of the statistics that they're throwing out there, especially when you hear terms like burnout, right? Or chronic fatigue syndrome. There's a lot of these other conditions that are highly affected by stress. I live with a chronic autoimmune disease, so I can appreciate this conversation a lot because I am on the other side of it too, as someone that's trying to navigate it. And I know that with my autoimmune condition, stress can deeply impact the symptoms. It can trigger the symptoms from happening. So I choose to eat a certain way. I choose to recover a certain way. I choose to move a certain way, because I know it helps me stay in a better place and it keeps me out of that place of overwhelm. But even though I do feel it from time to time, like, come on, man, we all do. But I now have some protocols that I like to do when I get to that place of overwhelm. Because full disclosure, I've struggled with my mental health most of my life. And a lot of that stems from what I went through as a kid. And I know it's childhood trauma, man. It's like a whole conversation in itself. But I've worked through a lot of it and I managed it really, really well. But every once in a while, when I'm fatigued or overwhelmed, overworked, undernourished, both emotionally, psychologically, physically, and nutritionally, I know that that's where I'm setting myself up for a fall. And when I crash hard. And I think a lot of us experience that. So it's this constant, like I get up, I go a few steps, and now I crash again. And we feel like there's this little bit of progression with a constant regression. So why bother doing anything at all? And that's the attitude I think we're all sort of fighting with. And so keep in mind, anxiety is a lot about the things in the future that we have no say on, no control over. And ultimately, it's never 100%. Depression is often related to things that have already occurred in the past that we can't change. It's out of our control to change, but we can make amends. We can reframe how our past is so we can bring it to the present and then use it to impact our future. But it's a matter of that ability of taking a second to pause, reflect, and then set some actions up for yourself. But I know that my physical health is one of the biggest factors contributing to everything I just said right now. I know that when I'm physically active, my mental health's in a better place because I feel better about myself. I'm better at regulating my emotions and my mental health when I'm physically healthy. So it's just one thing that's worked really well for me. And I know we're all slightly different, but from a lot of the people that I've conversed with, especially guys in my men's group and other communities I'm a part of, it seems that that's a very strong consistent that we share. If we're physically active, physically healthy, it's amazing how we can navigate the challenging and stressful moments much more resiliently and effectively. And those big peaks and valleys, well, they level off a little bit more, But the pause is really important. Just slowing things down, take a few breaths, and realize, that problem that's that little anthill that you're turning into, an Everest. Is it really deserve that kind of attention and energy? Probably not. But unless you take a second to slow down, you won't know. You just won't. It's just, the mind is an interesting thing. It has an ability all on its own to just blow things way out of proportion, And there's some positives with that, right? Especially if you're an overly optimistic or someone like me that suffers from chronic PMA, positive mental attitude. I will always look at the cup being half full, not half empty, And I'm going to figure out how to fill it up so I can overflow it so I can fill other people's cups too from that. But it takes time. And I have to make sure that I'm in a good place to do that. And that's why my personal health is so critical. It's a non-negotiable. So those are all some little tidbits. And I always say to people, you don't have to do everything I was just talking about. Just find one thing and try it. But try it consistently and frequently enough. So at least a good week of solid everyday consistency to make a proper judgment call on it. And I think a lot of people are really quick to quit when they don't feel change happening. And sometimes change takes a long time. Like I'll tell you, when I decided to get healthy as that 15-year-old morbidly obese teen, and I went out on that bike ride for the very first time, I went 3 blocks. All right. I didn't think, well, darn, I failed. I did feel that way, but I was like, that's okay. I'll come back tomorrow. I'll try to go 4 blocks. Okay. Next day, I'm going to go 10 blocks. Oh, wow. This is great. Okay. All of a sudden, after a week, I was going out for 30 minutes. I was like, wow, that's in just 1 week. And that 30 minutes doesn't feel anywhere near as hard as that first 3 blocks I did on day 1. You just got to trust the process and trust that good things will happen if we commit to it. And I know everyone's capable of this. I don't know anybody. I've never met anyone that's not capable of change. And I don't mean to be a party pooper, but it's the only thing that we know to be absolutely certain in our lives is that nothing stays as it is. Buddha said it's 2,600 years ago. Last 100 years, science caught up and said, hey, yeah, Buddha's right. Everything's in a constant state of flux, the law of entropy, right? Everything's just energy changing places, changing forms. So it's okay. It's there. Everything's going to change. It will change. But wouldn't it be more fun to be proactive in our change in our lives? Wouldn't it be nice to be able to feel like I'm an advocate for change for myself? I don't feel like a victim of it anymore. And that's the place I want people to adopt that perspective, because I know if they do, good things happen.
I love it. So many just great gems. Again, Dai Manuel, find him at daimanuel.com, DAIMANUEL.com. So we're at the end. I just feel like we're at a good spot. I had a couple other questions, but I think we're at a good spot with where you're at, with what you're sharing on your heart right now. And this is, I always end every episode this way. And there's a quote from John Alston that says, the only thing you take with you when you're gone is what you leave behind. And you're a young man, and you've been talking about your beautiful girls. And I know you're serving so many people, and so many people have been fortunate to have witnessed your encouragement and positive energy and positive attitude in their life. But now, 60 years later, you're on your deathbed and you're getting ready to take your last breath. What is it as you're getting ready to take that breath that you want to leave behind with everybody that is still going to continue on?
I left this place better than it was when I got here. That is really the legacy I want to leave. I want to be able to lie in the bed and say, you know what? It was all worth it, and the world's a better place because of it, because I was here. If that's it, man. And actually, I'm curious. I know we're wrapping up right now, Jeff, but are you familiar with a woman by the name of Bronnie Ware? Have you heard of Bronnie Ware?
No.
So she was an RN, but she specialized in not only long-term care but also end-of-life care.
Okay.
And she was based out of Australia, and she did a great TED talk. But more importantly, before that, she wrote a book called "The 5 Regrets of the Dying." And I just think that it would be something that you would really enjoy, but also I think your listeners would enjoy hearing some of those tidbits, because I'll just give 2 of the regrets. So, because when you ask me that question, instantly I think about what these regrets were that she collected from the people she had conversation. She had just wonderful bedside manner. I mean, you've been in those situations. That end of life process is very lonely. Doesn't matter how many people are around there with you in the room, you're still going on that journey by yourself. And I was there with my dad that final week in the hospice. I mean, it was hard, right? Even there a participant trying to make him comfortable. And thank goodness we had great care aides there that were there to make him comfortable. But here's Bronnie Ware having these conversations with these people and really befriending them and just trying to make them as comfortable. But she asked them a question: is there anything you regret not doing with your life? Of everybody that she asked, she was getting 1 or 5 of the same answers every single time. And, there's got to be something to this, hello, there's some clues here being dropped, right? But one of which was, I wish I lived the life I wanted to live, not the life others expected of me. Or I wished I allowed myself to be happier, which implies that happiness is a choice. We can choose to allow more happiness into our lives. Why don't we? Why do we want to be the martyr sometime? No, I don't deserve happiness. We just lock in those places. And I've been there. I get it. But I won't talk about the other 3. I'll leave that to you so you can share that with listeners' future. But anyways, I just want to thank you, Jeff. This has been just an awesome conversation, and more so me talking and answering. But it's been just wonderful connecting with you. And I absolutely love your platform and everything that you're doing in the world to leave an impact, and more importantly, create your legacy. So, we'll say 80 to 90 years from now when we're on our deathbeds, because we're living to be 130, 140. I know what your breath's probably going to be, look at what you're creating right now. And I just want to say thank you for that. It is truly wonderful, man. And it was an honor to be here today.
Yeah, that's right back at you. It's just so fun to do this work. And again, I got goosebumps 5 or 6 times. You just gave it to me again. But again, listeners, this was a treat. Make sure you check out his site. He's got a great blog, daimanuel.com. Get out his book, check out his TED Talk, and probably listen to this episode again, because he just dropped a lot of knowledge that's applicable, would be I think the best word to describe what you shared, because I can listen to that, and Dai's given me permission to keep it simple and to take action towards applying 1 or 2 things into my life, and then be patient in seeing the change. And it will happen. And with that, Dai and listeners, thank you again for tuning in to another episode. Normally, my Pasho gets us out, but boom, baby, that just happened. We out.